28 reviews later, time didn't heal anything. Let's talk about it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So, today we're going to be discussing or debating 28 years later. But before we get into that, you already know what time it is, movie recommendation time. So, guys, what's the best recent thing that we've seen?
So, I watched Magazine Dream, which comes up with a little bit of controversy, of course, with everything that happened with Jonathan Majors in the past year or so. It was always a movie that I wanted to check out just because it was, praised so highly when it was going around the film festivals and stuff. And of course, despite all the controversies, Jonathan Majors is a really strong actor. So I just had a bit of time and I put it on and I was like, okay, let me see what all the hype was about in this movie. And it's probably not for everyone. But just because of sort of the type of movie it is, where you have a character and he's constantly, I wouldn't even say he's being beaten down, but he's struggling because of his past and, because of a trauma experience as a child, which has then led to strong social disconnection for him, feelings of like isolation, not belonging, and social anxiety and things like that. And then the film just follows him trying to maneuver and trying to sort of operate in this world. It's quite brilliant in terms of the performance that Jonathan Major gives, but it's also quite depressing just to kind of see how everything plays out and how you can be perceived. There's like, a really interesting thing where he like meets a girl and, there's the perception of how you are from when someone, first sees you. But then when you actually speak to someone, you actually sort of understand the psyche and how challenged they might be, or just because of like the circumstances and whatever. I think overall it was like, a really strong performance. I'd liken it to, the first Joker movie. It's pretty dark at times in the movie as well. It's definitely a heavy movie and one that you probably wouldn't watch multiple times. But if you were just kind of wanting to watch something where you're seeing the character, and I'm kind of like going over it because I don't want to like spoil anything, and I don't want to give something too much away the movie. But it's just a great portrayal of someone that doesn't fit into society and how that pans out for their life.
I'm a fan of Jonathan Majors' work. It's just that trailer looked boring, so I just never thought. I just said to myself, yeah, I ain't gonna watch it. But after hearing what you're gonna say, I would think I'll check it out. I don't know. I'm a bit 50-50, but I think I'll check it out. Cool. So for me, I actually rewatched this film called Back Country about a couple that end up going camping and then they're faced in front of a bear. So it's a survival film. There's nothing really that's done that's like out of the ordinary or something that's unique. Like it's pretty much expected in terms of like sequences of events. So it will turn out the way that you expect it to turn out. It's a fun film to watch, but it does get a bit gruesome at times. Overall, fun film. I recommend Backcountry.
So I watched Wind River, which is a 2017 crime drama movie. It is set on an Indian reservation in Wyoming. And essentially, a dead woman is found in the snow in the middle of nowhere. And an FBI agent is called in to investigate the case. It turns out that she died from the results of injuries that point towards a very gruesome death. The story essentially follows the FBI agent, a tracker who works for the Fish and Wildlife Service and who knows the area, and the chief of the native police who has jurisdiction within the reservation. And that those three, after some initial conflict, begin to trust each other and begin to realize that they are the only three people who care about achieving justice for this woman who died under awful circumstances. You have the FBI agent who is an outsider. You have the tracker who is a white guy who married into a native family and has been living with them for many years and is accepted in the community, but still is kind of an outsider. And you've got the chief of the native police who is Indian, right? And those three essentially have to trust each other and have to kind of work together to solve this case. And large parts of the movie are essentially about this, but there are also a window into what these reservations are like and what, like how the people there relate to people on the outside and why and so on. It's called a crime drama, but solving the case or the mystery is actually not really the point. They kind of just tell you towards the end what happened. It's more about trust and history and people kind of trying to do the right thing, even if the world doesn't want you to. That's kind of what it comes down to. Because obviously Native Americans have good reasons for mistrusting like the federal government and all of that. And there's all this history there that informs how these characters act and how they relate to each other. And it's very heavy, it's very emotional, it's very well acted. You shouldn't watch it if you want like a puzzle to solve, but just to get like 2 hours of misery and people pushing back against the misery and the hopelessness. That's what this movie is really good about. So that's my recommendation for the week.
It's a lot of depressing and miserable films this week.
Looks like it's time for the main event. 28 years later. Daniel, please may you do the honors and give us a synopsis.
So 28 years later is kind of a sequel to 28 Days Later. It picks up 28 years after the outbreak of the rage virus. It follows a Scottish community who live on this island off the coast of Britain, who have survived in the zombie-infested Britain that has been quarantined by the rest of the world. And the story essentially follows this 12-year-old boy who is kind of growing up in this world, and he has never known anything else. And he kind of goes through this coming-of-age ritual that kind of makes him a full member of this community, and that kind of teaches him what life is like and what he has to do to survive in this quite bleak and desperate situation. He has this sick mother, and he finds out that there is a doctor somewhere on the mainland, and he essentially goes out on a quest to find him in the hopes of curing his mother. So what did we think of 28 years later?
It felt like watching a long episode. Let me just start by saying, the way that the first act started, I thought that this was going to be in contention of being film of the year. I really, really liked the first act. I'd say I really, really liked from the first 30 to 40 minutes. I was like, yes, this is looking good. But then when it drifted off to the main story, that's where I felt like it became a long episode, especially with the way that it ended. That being said, I wasn't angry at it. I just think it wasn't as good as the first 40 minutes. I think the way that it ended, that plot, even though that plot was the ending, that should have been in the film. Because I do understand that there are, of course, the way that it ended, there's going to be another film. I think people are saying there's like going to be like 2 more movies after this. Clearly, the way that ended, yeah. But I think just the way with the main story, it felt underwhelming. For me, it really felt underwhelming. I wasn't mad at the transition from what I thought the film was originally going to be, because the way that it was marketed, it felt like it was going to revolve around, obviously, the Craven guy. I didn't even know the Craven guy had a son in this, obviously. So that, you know what I'm saying, they didn't really show that in the trailer. Maybe they did, I just wasn't paying attention. So I thought it was going to revolve around him, but it didn't. So I was like, which I wasn't too angry about, but it's just the way that it ended and the way, just the storyline they chose to go with. I was like, okay, that's cool, but there should have been more. And the ending should have been in the film. So they should have continued after what happened at the end to kind of make it feel a bit more complete. So that's why I felt like it felt like a long episode. Overall, I think it was, like I said, first 40 minutes was really, really good. I really enjoyed what I liked, especially from the new infected zombies, like especially the alpha. He gave crazy vibes, especially in the first 40 minutes, just crazy vibes, unsettling vibes. Like I said, there was a lot of things which I did like. However, the way that the film ended up transpiring, I said, man, it felt like a self-sabotage. So yeah.
I don't think I'm as enthused about this movie as all the critics were that gave it, such high praise. I mean, I definitely liked the themes that explored in this and how the story was centered around, death in sort of multiple different lenses in this movie. But I just don't think I had a good time watching the movie. Like, first, I know from 28 years later when it was shot on a camcorder, and in this movie that they wanted to shoot on iPhones and multiple iPhones, and obviously all the accessories and gadgets to really spice it up. Some of the kill shots that they were doing and the effects of that, I was a bit like, oh, okay, I don't, it's not for me. I understand you're trying to show a different artistic direction with this, and trying to show kills in a a little bit more of a flamboyant way or whatever they were trying to go for, but it was just a bit jarring for me. I hated every time that someone was killed and the camera would do whatever effect it was doing. I felt the story was a bit long and a bit boring. I don't know. I wasn't as engaged in the character journey that the boy was going on. I didn't quite enjoy the whole element of him and his father as well. It took me a while to understand what the point of the movie was, especially when they kind of like first went out and came back. And again, I understand that the story's centered and themed around death in multiple different ways, but just because it has a good exploration doesn't mean it makes for a good movie and good viewing experience. And I definitely wasn't having a great time with it. I think the performances in this were good. I think Little Boy did a really good job of portraying various different emotions. The anger, his father, and some of the later emotions that come later in the movie. I don't know. Overall, like I wasn't hating my experience in the cinema. I won't say that, but I just couldn't find myself immersed in the world and in the story and in the characters. And even with the zombies as well, I know they tried to innovate and try to do something a little bit different with the zombies. I was a bit like, yeah, okay. Like it was cool. Like I'm not saying it was bad, but it wasn't. I don't know. It wasn't anything that blew my mind away, and it didn't completely, for me, anyways, change zombie lore the way that the first movie did in terms of how it added faster zombies to the zombie genre. I think overall my experience with it was cool, just not enthused or fully engaged with the movie as others might have been.
So I went into this movie kind of expecting a bit of a train wreck. I like 28 Days a lot. I think it's a very distinctive zombie movie. It's not just about the fast zombies, but just thematically, it's very different from most zombie stories. 28 Weeks Later, I think it's a complete dumpster fire. Don't like it at all. And so 28 years later, I was kind of dreading it a little bit. It looked like a bit more of a generic zombie story. From even as good as the trailer is, it looked very generic. Reviews were very mixed, with many very negative reviews. So I was kind of expecting not much as I walked into it. And then as the movie unfolded, especially in the third act, I was kind of blown away. And what I actually got was the most sophisticated zombie story I've ever seen, I think. Let's talk about it.
I was not expecting that.
I mean, that's a strong statement to say it's the most sophisticated zombie story you ever experienced. So why did you feel that way?
Zombie stories are about death, right? They are about the world dying and about the dead coming back to kill the living. Like the idea of death is very prevalent, and also irreversible death, in the sense of like this is not like the world is ending. It's not just a crisis, not just a bad day, it's not just a danger. Like the world is over, right? Like that is ultimately kind of the thematic underpinning of the zombie genre, right? And 28 Days Later took a slightly different tack, where they said, this is a crisis, this is bad, this is causing the collapse of a society, but it's limited. The zombies are not taking over. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, right? 28 Weeks didn't really do anything with that. It was like a jumbled mess a little bit. And what 28 Years does is it shows life among death, right? So people are living in this world dominated by death, and it is about moving forward, and it is about adaptation, and it's about being at peace with the cycle of death. And there's a number of different ways in which this happens, which is we have Spike, right, who is learning to live in this world, right? The entire first act is about him learning the lessons he needs to learn to survive, right? And surviving means living, and living means killing. That is the first lesson he learns, right? Kill anything that isn't your tribe, right? And then you might live. Then we've got the dying mother, right? So she is dying from something that would have been curable had she not lived in this world, right? If she had lived in our time, in our world, she would have been diagnosed, and she would have gotten treatment, and she would have had pretty decent chances of living. But she's condemned to this slow and agonizing death because she lives in this zombie world, right? And then we've got pregnant zombies who are giving birth to uninfected humans, which means they have not only found a way. So one of the big questions I had was, 28 Days Later makes a very big point about how the zombies are not sustainable, right? They cannot feed themselves. They will eventually run out of food, and then they will die, and then it's over. And before watching this movie, I was very apprehensive about this being hand-waved away, right? And I think it is a little bit of a retcon. Like we get a number of different scenes where we see how the zombies are feeding. I think that's still a hand-wavy retcon. That's still saying you just forget about that part, which is a bit of a shame because I thought it was really interesting about the first movie. But anyway, it's okay. Like, this is how you explain a stable population of infected people. But we see that they can become pregnant, and then they give birth to uninfected humans. Like presumably, If the protagonist hadn't intervened, that child would have been infected immediately, right? But technically, they are born uninfected, and that means life. That means hope. That means it's not all over, right? The zombies are not actually fully taking over. Humanity is still around. And then the entire third act is about grief and letting go and being at peace with death, right? And creating a duality between mortality and love. When the doctor says, memento mori, remember you have to die. Memento amori, remember you have to love. And those are two sides of the same coin. And the entire ending is Spike learning to let go and say goodbye to his mother, who has been dying his entire life. And now she's finally at peace and he is at peace. And that is how the movie ends. Spike has come full circle, embracing death and life at the same time and viewing them as two different sides of the same coin that are both necessary to life. I think that is sophisticated.
And would you add to that as well, the whole, on the father side of things as well, is about how he's essentially teaching about killing and about, things needing to die, essentially. He's almost like, in that particular environment, he's learning about death and the finality of it, and how you need to kind of like kill or be killed, and how he's almost like emotionless to death, whereas like by the end of it comes full circle about death and love and understanding how the two can go together. But in the first instance, when he's out hunting with his father, it's just all about being emotionless and about just killing to survive, and doing everything that he needs to stay alive. I feel like that kind of like feeds into the character journey that Spike went on in this as well.
And I think the father is correct. Like, this is what Spike has to learn. He cannot simply, like, none of us has ever killed anything, right? Is that fair to say? We've never killed another, like, definitely not another person, but we've also never killed for food. And we've never killed in self-defense, like a wolf because it attacked us or somebody we cared about, right? This is not part of our life, but it is part of Spike's life. And the father is completely correct to teach him this. And he should be proud when Spike kills his first zombie, because that is in fact important.
No, I agree.
So is that what you're getting at?
Essentially, because he's essentially like learning about death in multiple different ways, and the different interactions that he has with the different characters that he has in his life, essentially. So yeah, it was like how his father was teaching him that element of death, whereas like with his mother, it was like a little bit more of a softer kind of like grieving and acceptance, and that whole like remembering and continuing that on, essentially. Whereas like again on the father side, it was more the survival side of it, and how you have to kill to survive, essentially.
But do you guys feel like there should have been an expansion to that storyline? So they should have been a bit like, because for me that's my one of my issues, that it transitioned a bit too soon. I wanted to kind of see that. I wanted to kind of see more of that like evolve. I'm sure it was intentional, because obviously it might have been like a reflection of what society is like at the time. Because like you say, he's gonna have to learn quickly because he's learning very young. So that does mean he's gonna have to learn quickly. Obviously, the way that translates into him needing to learn quickly because he's learning very young. So I do understand why maybe in that aspect, the transition from him becoming a boy to a man. Well, he had to kind of learn himself how to become a man, but you get what I'm saying, that transition kind of happened quickly because it falls in line with obviously the film and the theme of the film. However, for me, I just think I wanted to see a bit more of that evolving. I don't know what the negative reviews are on this film, but I'm assuming is it revolving kind of like around the whole storyline with the boy's journey with his mum and trying to find a cure for that.
So I sent you guys a review I found, right? So critical reviews are high. They were like 98 when they started, and I think now they're in the high 80s, and we'll see where they land. But audience reviews are like 60%, something like that at the moment. Google reviews are like 60% one star, so a lot of people didn't like this. And I found one that really is notable, and I'm gonna read it. I saw that 1/4 of my body cells were dead. I ran away from my seat holding the plastic bottle in my hand and rushed to the exit without looking back. It was so ugly. I must be ranked in the top 2 of my life. I will go home and sing until dawn to soothe my injured heart. That's all. Who am I and where am I? It's notable that this was translated from Chinese, so there's some idioms in there probably, but still, like, the sentiment here is, what is this? why did I watch this? Like, why did they just not make a proper zombie movie? So in our recent video about The Returned, we kind of talked about the difference between a zombie movie and a movie with the zombies in it. And I think the zombie movie genre especially is something where people have very specific expectations about what kind of plots and characters and themes they get. And this just does not care. It does its own thing, and you may like it or may not. And it gives you some zombie kills and whatever, and like the zombies are traditional zombies, and like the fast zombies are very much out of the first movie, and the other types of zombies we see are kind of like things you've seen in other zombie stuff, right? To the point where they're kind of video gamey. Like, really, we have alpha zombies. Like, couldn't you have come up with something better? It feels like a video game end boss, right? But point is, if you know other zombie movies, you have certain expectations about what kind of movie this is, and this movie is not that. It is simply a world with zombies in it, and it uses the idea of zombies for something thematically completely different. And I think the negative reviews come down to, this is not what I expected, this is not what I wanted. And that's fine. Nobody has to like a thing, right? Like, if this is simply boring to you, then that's fine. I'm just saying this movie is very clearly trying to do a whole bunch of things, and it uses zombies as a tool to explore those themes, specifically about how people handle death, right? And how people live with death, which is not typically something that zombie movies go to. And for me, that is why it's such a positive reaction. Like that scene where they are with the doctor and they're saying goodbye to each other, and they come to realize what the situation is, and there's not going to be a cure and so on. The entire cinema was dead silent. Nobody said a word. Nobody breathed. And then when people walked out, people talked like they were stunned. Like, you need to be open to accepting this movie on its own terms. And not everybody is going to want to do that. I did not have a good time watching the final act, but it was a really heavy and strong and powerful experience. And that is not what you would get from this kind of movie typically.
And I agree with what you're saying, by the way. I feel like you should definitely be open to change, basically. And I liked, like I said, I liked that idea. So I liked the second storyline to the film. I didn't have an issue with it. I just, like I said, I just think the transition came a bit too soon, and that storyline just wasn't enough. I just didn't feel like it was enough for it to be the chunk of the film. That was just my issue. But I do like like you said, I do like everything that you said. I do like the kind of like fresh perspective, and they tried something else. They tried something new, different, something that deviates from the norm.
I think for me is that I just never really fully connected to the characters completely, and I wasn't behind this journey that they were on. And I understood the boy's desperation to save his mother, but I just never had that empathetic reaction to his situation, because I liked what was going on. I liked what the idea was of, again, him trying to save his mother and fighting so desperately to stave off death and prolong his mother's life. It's a feeling that a lot of us will experience, or like everyone will experience at some point, where you have someone that's close to you that is in a situation where they won't recover from, and it's like that desperation, is that feeling of helplessness, and wanting to try and do everything that you can to save them, even though ultimately you can't. But I don't know. I just never really was fully on board, and I can't explain why, because I feel like the movie does a lot of the right things in terms of its themes and how it's sort of trying to showcase it through its characters, through the world. But there was just something missing.
How did you feel about the first 20 minutes of the film, in terms of like the father and the son's journey?
I was cool with it. I was like waiting to see where it was going to go. I haven't seen the trailers briefly. I never really sort of fully watched some of these trailers. I kind of thought that they were just going to go on an adventure, the both of them, and kind of get not lost, but end up in sort of various different situations, and they'd have to, I don't know, go through like whatever character moment. So when they made it back, I kind of was like, oh, okay, so like, what is this movie about, and like what are we trying to sort of do with this movie? And then, of course, sort of everything that came afterwards happened. But I thought it was interesting. I thought it was quite well done. And it was actually good to see some of the, not callbacks, but some of his teachings and some of his learnings that he had, through that experience with his father, play out when he was on the adventure with his mother. One person, like, say, behind the shoot, like the zombies that were near the front, and sort of kind of like taking that in turns and whatever, and just sort of being sure in his kills later on in the movie. So it was all fine. It was all well done.
I do think there are a number of very serious problems in this that I think make it harder to get into the story, and that I don't think need to be there. I don't like some of these things are there because that's just what the story is about, but other things are just there because they're just weird choices. So, for example, when Spike decides to go out with his mother and kind of sneaks out, essentially, it feels a little bit abrupt. It feels like we are now in a second movie, right? Like it did not feel like the transition was done very well, where we had one kind of story up until like the entire trip out and return and the party. And then he finds out that, I don't remember exactly what it was he finds out. He finds out that his father knew about the doctor existing, that there's a doctor out there. And he reacts so abruptly and so quickly and so radically that I did not really buy it. Like, I have no problem with like that, like the big picture stuff, but it's more like those couple of minutes where he makes that decision and actually then goes out into the mainland. It felt forced. It felt abrupt. It felt like not gradual. There would have been ways to kind of foreshadow this. Like, for example, they like he might have said like be more about let's go out and see what's out there, and hey, maybe there's a doctor, and maybe it could have been foreshadowed that this town lost their last doctor 10 years ago, and they think there are no doctors out there, but there might be one, two towns over. And why are we not going out? There seems to be no trade. There seems to be nothing. Every town seems to be just on its own. And maybe Spike could have asked questions like, hey, why don't we go to this other town and ask if they have a doctor? And maybe we have something they need and whatever, right? Like that could have foreshadowed this willingness to go out and take this risk. And it seems to come more or less out of nowhere, I think.
That's my main point. Like just the transition was, like you said, very abrupt. That's my main issue with the film.
Another one I think that doesn't quite work is just how afraid they are of dealing with the doctor. Like the entire justification for why nobody has ever talked to this doctor seems so contrived. Like, yes, he's weird. Yes, he's doing strange stuff out in the mainland. But all they saw was him just like burning bodies once. And then nobody ever, like the entire town decided to never talk to him. And the entire plot is hinged on Spike breaking this taboo and going out anyway and taking that chance anyway. And, when you certainly watch the trailer and you see kind of the towers of skulls and whatever, it looks like a Mad Max cult, right? Like a death cult or something like this, right? Like that is what I expected going in because that's what it looks like. And it turns out to be completely unwarranted. And maybe there's a thematic point being made here about appearances. And actually, yes, there's one I've got that I segue into in a minute. But just the entire town having decided we will never talk to his doctor, we will never go near him. We will not even send out 20 guys to make sure that he's not a threat to us, right? Nothing. Like there's just this taboo. And that did not seem warranted. Like it did not seem like the doctor did anything to warrant this. And the idea that the only doctor in the world you have access to is so off limits based on nothing is weird.
You wouldn't even have the curiosity to be like, how is he survived on the mainland for how long was it? Was it 10 years or so that he'd been kicked out for? Yeah. Something like that. If he's been out there for 10 years and you've seen that fire go on for a certain amount of time, naturally you'd be curious as to what's happening out there. How's he survived on the mainland amongst all the different zombies? What can we learn from him? Because we're on the safe side where we've got this water in between us and the mainland, which during high tide you can't cross, but he's living amongst them. What's he doing that we're not doing, essentially, and how can we share knowledge? Even in that sense, I feel like you would naturally have that curiosity.
It may be that there's something sinister here, right? Like we've seen kind of zombie stories and post-apocalyptic stories where somebody has just completely gone mad, right? And is doing things that are so beyond the pale that no matter what the potential benefit of working with them is, they're just off the table, right? We've seen those kinds of stories, but it's not like within what the village knows, the doctor is not like this, right? Well, it's not clear that he is.
But I don't think I necessarily have an issue with the way that they handled the doctor situation because of the way that the society was presented. I do hear what you guys are saying, but I think obviously word of mouth definitely had a thing to do with that. But also the way that the society was, they were very cautious about everything, very cautious, even with their own people. I remember the scene when obviously the main actor with his son, when they were running back and then they were knocking on the door, and then she was waiting to see even if he was infected, right? Which of course I understand, you're following protocol course. I understand why your cautious there, but we've even with
Which, sorry to interrupt. I called this in our 28 weeks later review. I said, all you need to be safe is a 30-second quarantine, because then you know if somebody's infected. And this is what they do here. And I clapped in the theater when I saw this, because yes, there's Danny Boyle listens to our podcast, evidently.
Oh yeah, and also like even, which was a bit of a question. I had a raised question as well, because I had two questions I wanted to ask. I was a bit confused why, but like even when the boy disappeared, it doesn't seem like, well, I don't know if he did, but they didn't clarify, they didn't make that clear. But like the dad didn't go after the son when he left. So it was like, okay. And there was another scene as well where the woman's giving the whole speech about if you leave, something like that, you won't be able to come back in. I forgot, but pretty much. Sorry.
We will not send anybody out to get you. Once you go into the mainland, you're on your own. They make that's one of the core rules, yeah. Exactly. Which is insane, because you cannot afford to do this. But anyway.
Exactly, but that reflects the type of society that they're living in. So that kind of made it more believable why they wouldn't why there wouldn't be any curiosity, because it's like, okay, it seems like the society they're living in is curiosity can get you killed. So the word of mouth already is that this guy is dangerous, right? And even the way that the dad was explaining to the son, it's like he didn't really know, but he heard from other people. It felt like he heard from other people that he was dangerous, so he's pretty much just following what everyone else is saying. And when it comes to danger, they're not taking any risks with danger. So I understand why they wouldn't go and get the doctor and find out if he's really a danger or not, with already how they're already behaving regarding just the society rules that they have on the island.
Yeah. One other thing that made no sense to me is the entire quarantine. Like, the entire story is predicated on the entire world quarantining Britain. You can say this comes from like the events of 28 weeks later, where they tried to do it, but it blew up, and mainland Europe almost got overrun because of this. Okay, fine, but nobody is sending the survivors supply drops. There's no program to get people off the island. There are no visiting doctors that travel the villages, right? Like, you can imagine like a situation where a doctor flies in, like 10 crack commandos are guarding them against zombies, and at the first sign of an infected, they take off in a helicopter or in a boat. But in the meantime, if nothing happens, they treat a couple of people, or they drop off medicines or something. Nothing like this. It's complete airtight quarantine. Did you believe this?
I didn't quite get that. Even for the soldier that landed on the mainland and was a bit like, oh, no one's going to come and get us, I was a bit like, why? Like, why? I understand that the zombie gene might mutate, but it's similar to what happened in 28 Weeks Later, when they just started shooting at people randomly. And even when they were like driving the car, they were shooting at the car. And it's a bit like, it doesn't make sense, because this person is clearly not infected. And like you said, there was no airdrops because there is no risk of contact there. You're literally just dropping off supplies, whether it's like aid, medicine, or like, food for them to eat and water and whatever. Or there isn't a program of like, do you have like, starting with like the young people or whatever, how can we get a handful of people off the mainland at a time and bring them into normal society? And what always amazes me in these movies is how useless the people are that have the guns, how useless the military are against the zombies, especially when you see scenes of like the father and son dealing with zombies with bow and arrow, and then they then try to show us scenes of the military, who again are meant to be trained, having a tough time dealing with, I wouldn't say it's a handful of zombies, probably a little bit more than a handful of zombies, but you have an automatic rifle. And if a bow and arrow can take out the zombies, then I'm pretty sure your gun will do a lot more. So I always have issues with that in sort of this series of zombie movies. But it just doesn't seem plausible, this idea of everywhere is, completely normal. And it did lead to one, funny joke about when he was showing his girlfriend and he thought that she had an allergic reaction or something like that. That was a funny joke. But it just doesn't seem normal for the world to advance to where we are today, essentially, where they have like iPhones and stuff like that. But no one can, there's no plan to how you sort of deal or help with the people on the island.
So what's the problem with each town having a radio and talking to the mainland? Who's going to get infected that way?
The person that brings the radio.
So airdrop it. No human contact. Send a drone. It's not like, it's like, bottom line is it's contrived. It's just there to get the post-apocalyptic survivor narrative. It's not justified in the story, and I wish it was. If you really nitpick it, you can maybe say, oh, like this virus is so infectious and the idea of carriers has freaked out people to such a degree. But carriers are not a problem for the village, right? Okay, so maybe you can say, okay, they don't let outsiders in, and that is why they don't trade or whatever. Maybe, okay. But I don't think, I didn't feel like they justified it, like at all, nearly enough.
Nah, same. So
Yeah.
I had a quick question. Because there was a moment which I thought was going to be an important moment, but it ended up not being an important moment. I just want to kind of like make sense of what happened. Remember the scene where the son was about to get eaten when the mother and the son went out, obviously, to the zombie infested island. The son was taking watch while the mother was sleeping, and then he was nearly going to be eaten by that blob type of zombie that was crawling up towards him. And then obviously we ended up finding out that the mum saved him. In that moment, what happened? Because I felt like that moment was going to be like an important part, because the way that it was pretty much a moment of rage, the way that she saved him, because it felt like that amounted to nothing. Was that just a sign of, like, you know, her amnesia? Well, I don't know if it was amnesia, but yeah, amnesia. I'm sure, because she was forgetting what's happening, or was that supposed to be something?
So she had moments of clarity, right? Like she had good moments or she had bad moments. And that is why initially I thought she had dementia or something like it. And it turned out to be something else. So first of all, I don't believe that they would just sleep out in the open. They wouldn't go to the top of the tower or something that's easily defendable or whatever, right? That's one more moment that is really contrived. And then the fact that she saves him in secret, like it's positioned as something she's hiding from the sun, right?
Yeah.
And you know, just for a brief second I thought, okay, maybe she's not really sick, like something like I've seen stories like this, right, where somebody is hiding something like this and we see a scene like this to indicate that they are not who they are, but they pretend to be somebody else, whatever, right? But yeah, I don't know what this was about. And it's not even about, look, drop your guard for a second and it might kill you or something. Like they didn't even do that. It's the equivalent of that scene where in 28 Days Later, where they drive through the tunnel and kind of speed over kind of the pileup of abandoned cars, and surprise, surprise, they get a flat tire, and a tense action scene ensues. We talked about that, and that scene is also somebody just being stupid for the sake of a tense scene. And I think this is the same thing. I think somebody thought this was a cool visual, but I don't think it makes sense. I don't think there's any, like, it's not even an understandable mistake. I think it's just there.
I thought that was a cool scene at first, and until obviously it amounted into nothing, because obviously she's presented as a helpless, you know, as a helpless woman, and then all of a sudden she goes freaking superhuman and does a mad thing. So I'm like, whoa, like.
I think if anything, it shows, you know, a mother's strength. If I'm trying to like apply some context to it, it's like the love for her kid and the mother's strength, where you have her in her weakest moments, and he's doing everything he can to care for her, but ultimately, like, she still, you know, found the strength, even though, like, you know, she's in whatever condition, she's dying, she's confused, but in that moment of danger where he was, you know, in trouble, she still stepped in despite her condition, is the only thing I can kind of apply to that.
Yeah, which is, I think, pretty weak. I just don't think that scene makes any kind of sense. Should have been cut, should have been replaced by something else. One other thing I really wanted to get into is the idea of myth making. That is really big in this movie, right? The really big one is that when Spike and the father return from the trip, the father makes up a story about what a hero Spike is, right? And like how he never missed a shot and all of that, right? I think Spike was brave in this, right? But he didn't do what the father said he did, right? But I think the community needs to believe that they're secure, like they will be safe in the future, because eventually this generation will take over. And I think that, like, ultimately I don't think there's a big like conspiracy behind it. It's more like people need to believe that the future is secure. And if it's a little bit more complicated than that, then you have to lie so that people believe it, and that has its benefit on its own, right? So that was a really, really big part, and Spike does not understand this, and he's weirded out by it.
Yeah.
But do you think that was the father's motivation? Because I'd understand that a little bit more if it was, you know, maybe the chief of the village, or, you know, one of the elders of the village, or whatever they're called in this. But because it's his father, I kind of feel like it's just him talking up his son and almost like protecting him from, you know, shame or anything like that for you know, missing and not being as accurate. Whereas, like, if it came from someone else, I think I'd like I'd get that, or the same reaction that you, or same sort of takeaway that you had from it.
That makes sense, but it's more like he didn't have to go this far. He could just have said, no, like, Spike, did amazing. He killed a zombie. Like, he was brave. He whatever, right? Like, in which would all be true. He doesn't have to embellish it quite that much. And I don't know if he's making a conscious choice to create this myth, but I'm just saying that's the effect it has, right? And there are other aspects of myth in this as well. So we live in the UK, right? So maybe an American audience would have picked up on this, but this is a Scottish town flying an English flag. And they are church of, like, the whole thing was started out as like an Anglican mission, and they have a picture of the Queen of England on their wall. She died like 3 years ago in our world, but in this world probably been dead for 20 years, right? So, but they still have a picture on the wall. None of the new generation know who Queen Elizabeth is. The country they are identifying with, first of all, they're Scottish and they're identifying with English icons, right? There's no Scottish flag anywhere. And every icon they have is English. Like, this being British filmmakers, I really want to know, like, what the thinking behind this was, because it's got to be like, if you are British, you don't do this by accident. Like, if this was an American filmmaker, I could have said, okay, maybe you don't understand the history of this, but from a British filmmaker, this has to be deliberate.
I don't think I even know the history behind it, to be honest, and I'm not a historian on this.
Well, just the fact that they are like they are not English.
Yeah, that for sure. Yeah,
it can't be a careless mistake. If it is, then Jesus Christ, I'm surprised there's not much of an uproar when it comes to that.
I don't think it's a mistake. I think it's on purpose. I don't know the politics of Danny Doyle and Alex Garland, and I'm not necessarily saying this is kind of like some English chauvinism or something. I think, like, I don't want to speculate on what the intent was. I'm just sure there was intent there. So it's like a flag of somebody else. It's the symbol of a state that hasn't existed in 28 years. There's stuff there, and then we keep cutting back to English longbowmen, interspersed with the actual archers who are fighting the zombies. To my knowledge, there is no tradition of longbow archery in Scotland, or at least not in, like, English longbowmen are legendary in their time. Like, this was like the super weapon of England, right? And there was this big tradition, and to my knowledge, this was confined to England. This was not everywhere, right? I'm sure there were Scottish archers, of course, but this mythic tradition of longbow archery is an English thing. And so we have Scottish people using bows to fight zombies, and it's being interspersed with this cultural icon of archery to win battles, right? But it's not their legend.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm looking at this like as a foreigner, right? Like I'm neither English nor Scottish. I have no dog in this fight. I'm not offended or anything like this. I'm just noticing it because it has so many instances of it, and this is so obvious to, I think, anybody who's looking at this from a local perspective, that it's got to be on purpose. I really want to know.
Do you think there's a hierarchy, as in, like, the island is underneath, which I'm pretty sure, which if there is, then obviously it'll be shown in the next film or after that. But do you feel like there's like a hierarchy that is just hinting that, okay, that this is controlled by, I don't know, but like it's controlled by, let's say, British government or something like that?
Yeah, but there doesn't appear to be a British government. It like this is like, these are symbols of a state that hasn't existed in a long time.
Yeah, but that's the point I'm saying, because if they're giving us these, because like you're saying, there's intentional what they're doing, right? But could those be hints, as in, like, there's higher ups to the island? Because I don't know if they mentioned their situation in terms of, well, what was the view? Was the view that they're the only one that existed?
They know about other towns, but they don't interact.
Okay. Did they say the reason why they don't interact?
It's dangerous.
Okay.
It's really in your face. Like, it's really obvious, I think.
The point is,
it's repeated over and over.
Yeah, the point is, I'm trying to make is, like, are they pretty much like colonized, for example? Is what I'm trying
by
to.
By who?
Is there like higher ups? Is there like higher ups? Is that the hints that they're trying to give? I don't know. That's what I'm just saying. That's what I'm trying to. I'm just trying to fish out any ideas or possibilities.
So,
that it could be.
So when they prepare for the party, they bring out like relics, essentially, right? And if you read the banners that they bring out, this was in like a Church of England mission before the collapse, and so all of their symbols come from that. So one way of possibly interpreting this is that the symbols mean whatever people believe they mean, and to these people they mean community. The English flag is not the English flag; it's their flag. It's the flag of their town, and nobody cares about anything beyond that. I don't know that fits with the idea of the longbowmen, right? You would think that kind of things get more local in this kind, like they draw on like local imagery and local traditions and local symbols, right? But they don't. They take somebody else's symbols and then build their identity around that. Just really interesting, I thought. I'm sure there's a graduate student out there, walking like a Scottish graduate student in film theory or literary criticism, having the day of their life right now. They're furiously typing their thesis over this, and I want to read that at some point. It's like it's there. I just don't know what it means.
Yeah, I even forgot that was in the movie. The whole like back and forth of like the longbowmen and stuff. I was so confused every time that came on because I was like waiting to understand the relevance of it to the movie and what was playing out. But I don't know. Like it never. Well, to me, anyways, it never amounted to anything. But like you said, I'm sure someone out there will be able to break it down, or I'm sure maybe I don't know if anyone's watched any of the directors' interviews, but maybe it's in there, the whole sort of reason why they draw on these inspirations. But yeah, to me, it was like confusion, and then I forgot completely about it as the movie progressed.
Yeah. Another aspect of myth making is everything to do with the Doctor, right? Like he is very mythologized. He's shrouded in mystery. People have been telling stories about him all these years, and none of them have anything to do with reality. And all of those stories are to their detriment. If they had just opened a dialogue, the Doctor, it seems like, would have been very happy to treat anybody who walked up to him, right? Like there's no indication that he would have turned anybody away, or that he would have exploited the fact that they need him. Like he never does anything selfish. So
does the movie explain why he left? I can't remember.
So his way of coping is to create this temple to death. Right? He's collecting bodies, humans and infected, and he boils their bodies to extract their skulls, and then he builds an altar out of their skulls. There's nothing sinister about this in his mind. He's simply celebrating their memory, and he's kind of coping with death. Like a world that is filled with death can only be engaged with on this level. And it makes him creepy and weird, but he doesn't harm anybody. He doesn't kill anybody. You can imagine like another zombie story where somebody like this uses zombies to lure people into traps, and then his victims are used for this temple and whatever. That is not what's happening. He's just collecting bodies who are already dead. Once you've seen the entire movie, there's zero reason for the town to shun him. Maybe he would have wanted to live in the wilderness. Maybe he would have wanted to spend the bulk of his time on this temple, but in between he would have cured some people. Maybe once a month he comes into the town, they give him some food, he treats some people. Would have been to everybody's benefit, but they're not doing it.
Yeah. I just think it's the result of word of mouth. I think that just spread, and they're like, all right, cool.
Yeah, it's the myth making, right? But it's like a myth in this case. So the thing about the town's like symbols, like the flag and like then like all their traditions, that is a positive thing, right? That is something to kind of hold the community together and to kind of build like a sense of us. We are in this together. The myth surrounding the Doctor is purely destructive in the sense that it prevents them from doing something that would have benefited them. So it's not like it's all good or all bad, right? It's like a mix of things. But people's decisions and life choices are being guided by myths in that sense.
I think we kind of like half touched on it amongst the discussion that we were having, but what were our actual thoughts on the zombies and how they try to sort of incorporate, new types of zombies into the story? Because again, the first movie was famous for having the fast zombies. How did we feel about the zombies in this movie?
My least favorite part, like the alphas, and especially the alphas seemed like video game bosses to me, and the fat zombies. There's nothing wrong with them exactly, but it's like you play a zombie video game and in regular intervals, the game introduces new types of zombies to keep it fresh, right? And maybe these are the low-level enemies you fight because they're slow and don't really attack anybody until you attack them, right? It felt video gamey to me. And I'm not sure what else they should have done necessarily, but I just was not impressed. It felt very transparently like an attempt to just do something new, because the first movie is so legendary for popularizing the fast zombies that this movie kind of has the expectation of doing a similar thing, but the alphas are just super lame.
Personally, I liked the alpha, not necessarily because of the idea of them, but mainly the way that they performed. Like they had memorable moments, especially the moment where we first see the alpha just standing in like a silhouette at the top of the hill, and then the rest follow. Mm-hmm. But just that moment there for like, I think the camera was holding for like 10 seconds. Room was silent. And you just see a silhouette of him in his arms, like his hands was like, that was like the highlight as well. I was thinking, damn, that guy really is that alpha. Like it just felt kind of unsettling for me. So it was mainly the way that it was mainly his performance is why I liked the whole alpha incorporation.
You can definitely feel the presence of the alpha. I think they got that right in terms of like when it was like chasing them, running at them, etc. I do feel like the whole ripping the guy's head off and like the spine being attached to it thing was like played out. I think, once or twice was fine, but it seemed like he was like doing it to everyone and then beating some of the rest with the head and the spine. I was a bit like, okay, whatever. But yeah, for me, like having seen, different types of zombies in, different video games or like different movies as well, you had things like the stalkers and bloaters and stuff like that in like The Last of Us. I was a bit like, I kind of feel like we could have maybe done a little bit better with, the variations, especially like the big slow ones. I was a bit like, I didn't understand the purpose of them. It didn't really serve any narrative purpose as well, to my knowledge. It was just kind of a different type of zombie for the sake of it. And I don't know, it didn't really add a great sense of danger. Like the alphas at least were, threatening when they were chasing you. The bloated ones, I was a bit like, I don't know why we're here.
Does anyone else have anything else to say before we go to last thoughts?
Jimmy sucks.
Yeah, who's Jimmy again?
Jimmy is the guy in the tracksuit at the end.
Oh,
and it's foreshadowed because so when they find the zombie that's been strung up in the building, and Spike is supposed to kill him, that guy has Jimmy carved in his chest. So that group did that, right? And then at the very end, they appear and they seem to have blocked off this pass, and they do these backflips and these cool kung fu moves and whatever else. I just did not like it. Like I said, like you just had this very heavy, emotional, philosophical treatment of life and death and hope and grief, and now you're giving us C-list supporting characters. Does not fit. It's clearly set up for the next movie. Should have been much more artful. They should have appeared at some point in the movie, and then in the next movie we can build on that or whatever. But the final scene is the worst.
Yeah. Well, the movie's coming out in January apparently, so we'll see. We'll see more kung fu, ninja, zombie killers.
Last thoughts.
For me, it's a decent movie. Lots of good themes, lots of good ideas in here, but as a viewing experience, as a cinema experience, it didn't quite come together the way that I, completely wanted it to. That's not to say it's a bad movie. You might go there and you might have a completely different experience. I think, the audience is quite mixed on this. So it's either, you like it or you don't. I kind of fall somewhere in between. I think it's just like the series as a whole. Like I did appreciate 28 days later, 28 weeks, as we said, was completely dumpster fire. And this is just kind of somewhere in between. So I think as a whole, like on the series, I'm not that invested. And even with like the directorial style, I talked about the kills at the start. I completely forgot about the random sort of moments that they were sort of incorporating in the movie. And the whole time I was just so confused and so sort of kind of taken out of the movie anytime that was happening. So the whole art style, like whatever, like I get it. It's kind of the signature for the franchise. It's not for me. Just go get some proper cameras and shoot a proper movie for me, please. Overall, I'll give it a 6 out of 10.
God damn, people really hate 28 Weeks Later. I actually like 28 Weeks Later. I feel like I'm a sucker for zombie films. I just kind of like immerse myself in that type of world and kind of like, see myself in that world and create a whole, film in my head. So maybe that's why. Maybe that's why I'm kind of like a sucker for these movies. But yeah, in terms of this film, I'm gonna give it a 7, but it's just touching 7. I was thinking of giving it a 6.5, but I thought about the other movies I've given 6.5, and I think this is slightly better. And I think the reason I'm gonna give this one a touching 7, just touching 7, mainly because of the first 20 minutes. Even bits with the mum and the brother, it was still good within the first 40 minutes. So I think, the first 40 minutes is why it's getting a 7. I had a really, really good time with the first 40 minutes. Second half was cool, but like I said, it was a bit undercooked. It was good.
So I think this does really interesting things with the idea of death and life and everything associated with that. I think it uses zombies in a really effective way to create an environment in which that drives the lives of the characters and what's on their mind and why they do the things they do. I think the characters are overall good. I think like I like Spike, I like the father, I like the mother, I like most of the characters involved. Like even Eric, we didn't talk about Eric very much, but I think he works. I think he fits into the story, and he's not likable, but he's appropriate to what he's supposed to do and what he stands for. I think there's a bunch of weird choices in this that kind of drag down the movie, and I'm kind of okay with a movie trying some things, but and you know, if you try stuff, some of it is not going to work. But like there's some really obvious stuff here where in editing they should have said, yeah, okay, we tried, didn't work, let's not do it. If that had been fixed, then the movie would be better and feel a little less janky overall. But I'm glad I watched it. I think it's the most interesting and sophisticated zombie story I've seen in a long time, in a genre that's kind of self referential and a little bit samey. This movie does something different and importantly succeeds at what it tries to do. So overall, I give it 28 out of 28 plus 6.
All right, cool, guys. Thank you very much for tuning into today's discussion.
If you've made it to this part of the video, thank you very much for rocking with us. We always appreciate your support. Of course, if you liked everything you heard and you enjoyed our discussion, you should probably tell a friend. And if you hated everything and you thought we were just chatting a bunch of bloated zombie nonsense, you should probably tell an enemy. We are the Eye of the Storm podcast.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week. Au revoir.
Ciao.
Bye bye.